50 springs our little room. About the woodlands I will go to see the cherry hung with snow. Happy birthday, Ahi Hausman. Let's get happy and invite some of our very, very special guests. First, folks, I want to invite a dear friend who's probably only about maybe half a mile away from me, but he seems a light year away. Please welcome Cary Levine, Associate Professor of Art History. There he is, and recent expert on Zoom. Cary, how are you holding up?
Holding up well, Max. Trying. Getting through it.
Okay, great, great. Well, I'm getting messages that my lighting needs some attention, so I'll work on that when we have presentations. Yeah, Cary, how's your Zoom technology going? It seems like you've gotten it down.
I'm learning. I'm teaching. I'm relying on my teenagers, and I'm getting by.
Okay. For those who don't know, Cary Levine is a professor of art history and overall good guy. So welcome, Cary. Are you happy?
As happy as can be.
Okay, good. Next up, Kumi Silva, welcome.
I feel like I'm right. It feels kind of good.
It feels good. How have you been holding up? You and the family doing okay in all of this?
Pretty well, actually. Yeah.
Okay, well, good.
Weirdly
good.
joyful.
Well, we're delighted to have you, and thank you for helping us distract all of our community with some good conversation and good information. And for those that don't know, Kumi Silva is a professor in the Department of Communication, and will be sharing us her unique perspective on what we have going on here today. And finally, it is a delight to welcome our very special guest, Rachel Schaevitz. Rachel.
Hi.
Rachel is a brand new Kiwi. Rachel is our former Associate Director for State Outreach, a former Town Council member of Chapel Hill, who decided to, I don't know, like ruin the world and go away to New Zealand on us while the world collapsed. So Rachel, welcome. It's a real delight to see you.
Hey, I like to be introduced by ruining the world.
Yeah, exactly. You haven't, no, you didn't. We wish you were here to give us solace, and it's really great to have you with us today. So Rachel, we're going to start with you and just get a little perspective on what this has been for you. Now, you moved, I believe, out of Chapel Hill February 15th, and maybe out of the United States, 4 or 5 days later. So what was going on with coronavirus when you were leaving? It's hard to, it feels like a million years ago.
I know. Yeah, it was only in China, in Wuhan at that point. And so our travel when we got to the Auckland airport, passport control, there was a line for people coming from Wuhan or China, and everybody else was in a different section. And so we had some really short questions like, have you been to Wuhan in the last 10 days or something? And other than that, it was not thought to be a global thing yet. And so when we got into, by the time we were in New Zealand, there had been no cases anywhere else yet. And so we weren't on a, people weren't paying a lot of attention to where we had been or where we were traveling from, really, other than not Wuhan.
Well, it seems like, obviously a lot of countries sort of got a late start on this in terms of thinking about it. Was there a sense in New Zealand that this was something far away? Something that, like this is in a foreign country, or how were New Zealanders conscious of Kiwis, excuse me, conscious of this, or a sense, or did it feel sort of like it felt here? This is over there.
I think so. Auckland is one of the most diverse cities in the world, and there is a huge Asian population from all over different parts of Asia. And so there were a lot of travelers from China, and I think that Kiwis were paying attention to it because there was a lot of migration back and forth from New Zealand and Australia and China. So they were taking it really seriously right away. And I think that kind of helped because it wasn't, oh, this is just the flu, it's not a big deal. I think that Kiwis were tuned in to it pretty quickly. And our government here instituted a nationwide mandatory lockdown so that Monday was level 3 and Wednesday was level 4, which is like, don't leave your house, schools closed, everything closed, only essential services nationwide. That took place on Wednesday. And so, and it's Friday morning here, so I'm drinking water.
That's right. You have to wait till 12 at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more possible in a place like this. It's 5 million people. It's an island. It's manageable in a way that it's not as manageable in other places.
Okay, great. So in general, I know that there have been political differences, and the political establishment, politics are very different in a country like New Zealand. Are you finding consensus around how the government should act and behave in New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a Labor government in power right now, and our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has wide support among her party and the opposition government. And there's a whole kind of like, we're all in this together, Kiwis coming together. They did a really sort of slick marketing campaign to try to stave off hoarding and like panic buying, where they got all of these celebrities, all blacks players, and Taika Waititi, their Oscar award-winning director, and various famous people to do a PSA kind of commercial with government officials from both parties and, just local celebrities, to try to say, we're in this together. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs, we can bind together as a country and stay in our houses and be kind and don't buy all the toilet paper and all this sort of stuff. And that commercial rolled out within 10 minutes of the Prime Minister's press conference. So it seemed like there was a organization around it where they were going to tell people you're on lockdown and then immediately really try to press people to be good neighbors and to be kind and to be in it together.
Very interesting. How about I know Dave is in the hospital. Is he working? And what's going on there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so those of you, many may know that my husband's an emergency room physician, and he started a job here March 1st. So he has been in the ER here. He has done the full PPE hazmat suit to test people for COVID. So far, everyone that he has tested who were potential COVID patients have all been negative so far. So he, to our knowledge, hasn't had an exposure, but lots of people, 2 of his bosses were on isolation for 2 weeks because they had been exposed to patients. And so it's certainly in his hospital, but just he hasn't had a case yet. Again, I think because New Zealand is small, it's manageable in a way that we're not used to as Americans, where like this whole country is smaller than, like, I don't know, 2 cities in North Carolina or something. But they have stopped all unessential surgery and repurposed all of those physicians to do different work. So anesthesiologists who would put you to sleep for your nose job or something are now on the COVID intubation team. And they have had special training to be able to intubate people, to use their anesthesiology skills in that specific way. And nobody is getting any plastic surgery. None of that kind of stuff is happening.
No sneaky on the side nose jobs.
No. And I
Patients.
think that it's also more possible because it's a nationalized healthcare system. So there aren't insurance companies. There's not a need to make money and profit in the way that the American healthcare system is set up to. And that's where Dave is coming from. And so his mom works for a plastic surgeon. So maybe that's why it's top of mind. My husband's mom, my mother-in-law in Philadelphia. And they're still taking new patients. They're still having consultations for definitely unessential medical procedures. And so she's the receptionist. She's at the front desk, like she's in the front line of taking people coming in and out of the office.
Oh, wow. Where
in New Zealand, that absolutely was shut down 2 weeks ago. And all of those healthcare providers redistributed to learn a particular skill so that if COVID does blow up here, they're all ready to go. So it's just so different because it's so centralized and government controlled. It's not private.
Great. Are you feeling safe in New Zealand? You're feeling like, I mean, it's odd. This is all about community, and you just sort of floated into it.
Yeah, I think, we got here, and before we could make any friends, we got locked in our houses. So that's weird. I mean, I'm happy to be in a place that feels like we have good leadership and people are doing the right thing.
Just
But at
rub
the
it
same
in,
time-
Rachel.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm just answering the question. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we are very isolated. We feel really isolated. We have no friends. We have no family. We're new people in a country where we don't know anybody, and we can't. We're just here. So it's nice to check in with you guys and to see some friendly faces, people I know.
Well, it's so great to see. It's so great to see you, Rachel, and thank you. And please stay and stay online with us so that you can comment on some of your good friends here who are going to present. And Kumi, hello. All right, wait, I think we need to unmute Kumi.
Oh, I just unmuted myself.
There you go. Don't silence
very
yourself. So, Kumi, we've asked people to bring something that maybe it doesn't have to necessarily make us happy, but how are you approaching this? How are you thinking about getting through this intellectually, emotionally?
So I was thinking, as Rachel was talking, I'm originally from Sri Lanka, but a different kind of island. And one that was in the midst of a civil war for a long, long time, much of my childhood and early adulthood. And then I moved from that civil war to Liberia, which was another civil war. So I was telling a friend recently that this is something that feels very familiar to me, and there's something weirdly comforting about that. The idea of containment. And not being outside, like, oh, this is like your body never forgets, right? I'm now going back to Merleau-Ponty and phenomenology and stuff. But I was thinking that there's something that your body immediately adapts to because it's so much in you, because this was very foundational to me. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the middle of the kind of the very intense part. I was a little bit older than my daughter is right now, when the war came to Colombo, which is where we were living, and my parents were like many, we're the ethnic majority, but like many people in the ethnic majority helped their friends who were the minority and hid them in their houses and had their own lives and their families' lives threatened. So I have this role model in my head of my parents who, I was actually telling my husband David this, that who you know, Max, but that I remember being cautious and concerned about the things that were unfolding, including the people in our parents' bathroom who had to hide in there for weeks. But I don't ever remember being afraid or ever doubting that my parents could get us through this. And I feel like that was so hopeful and such a wonderful gift that they gave me, that I want to be able to pass it on to my child and also the broader community if I can, that people have survived a lot worse things than this. And all we actually have to do is like stay inside our fabulously connected houses with our TVs, for most of us, right? That's the part where we are incredibly privileged. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, that there's also something about keeping our communities in our mind, the broader community that is not part of this kind of security, who there's a family actually quite close by, that I have seen who's homeless, and they, every time I go to the grocery store, of course, which I can, right? Like I can go to the grocery store and buy groceries. I've asked them whether they have a place to shelter, and they don't. So
it's fair. I mean, your own personal experience certainly gives you a sense of relative danger. Staying at home and having a nice, sip of beer or whatever, and being able to join colleagues. Yeah.
So, Kumi, I have a question.
Yeah, please, Cary.
I come from an island also.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's north of here. It's a Long Island. In fact, it's called Long Island. There also was a lot of...
Cary has spent the last 8 years trying to one-up me on our life stories.
Well, there were a lot of conflicts, like between Mets fans and Yankees fans, and things like that. So, you know, it was challenging in its own way. But seriously, I sometimes think about how in my life, I've never seen anything like this, and I've never struggled in the ways that not only we are, but the world is right now. And it feels like on top of global warming and Trump and everything, like the world is collapsing now. And you know, it struck me that you said how your parents had always instilled this idea of that you will survive, you'll be fine, it'll be okay. Or so how do you, what specific lessons, I know you're a parent, as I think most of us are here. What specific lessons? I always I'm finding it tough to kind of thread the needle between being realistic and telling them what's going on, but also not traumatizing them to the point where, you know, they never want to go outside again.
So we've done a lot of telling our daughter who's 10 that that this is fine. We have the resources to take care of her, that we have the wherewithal, that we are careful, we show her what we're doing. But we also say there are people who aren't as, so I have to say that I don't know if this is a particularly good parenting strategy, but there are also people who do not varnish the truth. Is that the term? So she knows, she's part of like the Sunrise Movement, because the world is going to end and only the young people can save it. And so she's aware. And I think that because we have been very honest about some things, we are able to be kind of positive about this. But also I think, and I can understand that part of it is, it's weird to think that growing up in war and under curfew with limited access to resources is a privilege, but I'm realizing that that is the privilege my child has, right? Is a parent who has gone through this and survived this. So has this sense of hope that through everything I can say, look, I came from that and I'm here now, and we can go through this and be okay. But I think it's really hard when you haven't experienced that. And I don't know what it's like. I guess I don't have an answer for you, because I don't know what it's like as an adult to not have experienced this and to be facing this as an adult when life has been relatively calm, right? So I think there's a lot of, I'm sure that you are doing far better than you think you are. And I think that's the part of it that's
He's an okay dad. Cary's an okay dad. I can give him that.
I mean, he's a mediocre friend, but I'm sure he's a great dad. No,
he's just okay. So Kumi, did you bring some things you wanted to share with us?
I did. So I thought I wanted to share a poem, and I hope this is helpful. And this is my approach to life in general. So, and I think it's useful at this point. It's a poem from Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese American poet, and it's called Joy and Sorrow. So do I read it out now?
Please, please, let it fly.
So Joy and Sorrow by Khalil Gibran. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burnt in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep in your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall.
Thank you, Kumi. Thank you, Khalil Gibran, and thank you, Kumi. That's really a great perspective. And be well, be safe, stay with us, and chime in on our conversation some more, and give our best and love to your family, of course. Cary Levine, art historian par excellence, and okay, Dad. Did you bring something you wanted to share with us?
I did. You know, I don't know if this is gonna lighten the mood or not, but I thought when you posed this question of bringing something related to my field of expertise, you know, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about and encouraging my students to think about is the role of art in all of this, not just, you know, one kind of art, but the arts in general. And I know that a lot of us have seen a lot of effort to, or a lot of attention paid to the arts, whether it be free concerts and things of that nature that are online and circulating around. But what is the role of art in a time like this? What is its function? Some people might suggest that it's, you know, frivolous at this time, that it's not necessary. And yet, as Kumi so aptly exemplified, art has been essential to society from the beginning, but especially in difficult times. And so I thought I would also shake things up by doing a screen share, because as an art historian, I'm actually, as personable as I am right now, I'm much more comfortable showing you things and not myself, and then talking.
And you learned how to do it relatively recently.
Yes, I've had to. So I'm going to share my screen with you all, and with its, there we go. How's that? Is that working? I can't tell because I can only see.
It is indeed.
Okay, so just to give you a sense of what you're looking at, I'm showing you two images that are either directly or indirectly related to the Black Death, the bubonic plague, as it was known. Thinking about dark times, hopefully our times don't get this bad, but thinking about the ways in which art has responded to, commented on times of difficulty. On the left of your screen, you see an image from a chronicle by, and I will not pronounce this name in front of a French historian, so Max will tell us how to pronounce the name of this person.
I will do no such thing. Gilles Le Muissi.
Perfect. Gilles Le Muissi, from the 1340s. It's one of any number of images that were produced around this time in the late medieval, early Renaissance period, when the plague was ravaging European cultures and beyond. It wasn't just limited to them. But I picked this particular image because if you look at it, what's happening here, it's a curious image. And what actually is happening is, what else? The burning of Jews. Now you say, why are they burning Jews during the Black Plague? Well, it always seems to be maybe a relevant thing to do to scapegoat people in times of difficulty. And in fact, Jewish people were often blamed as carriers of the plague. And so what you're seeing here is an image of people burning Jewish people in order to supposedly rid their community of the plague. And so I brought this image because I thought it was doubly resonant with our times, of course, when there's scapegoating going on in terms of where this horrible disease had originated, what it should be called, etc. So to say that we're not alone in having that phenomenon, but you know, it's been with us, unfortunately, and we see it in our art. And then the image on the right is, again, one of any number of images I could have brought in that are very death-oriented. And if you notice the date, 1493, so we're 150 years later, but this kind of death obsession became really apparent in the art and culture that comes after the plague itself.
And the plague keeps coming back too, so they would have
keeps coming back, and so they keep struggling with it, and it becomes kind of a major theme in the arts. And so thinking about not just how artists respond to dark times, so to speak, in the moment, but how it reverberates over time and across culture. I also brought in, and this led me to think about this famous Bertolt Brecht quote from our 20th century. I shouldn't say we're not in the 20th century anymore, but the 20th century. This great quote that says, from a poem of his, that says, "In the dark times will there still be singing? Yes, there will be singing. There will be singing about dark times." So it's not a question of whether art will exist or not exist, but what its focus will be. And then to finish it off, I brought an image from an artist friend of mine. This is hot off the press, so to speak, kind of addressing our current state. So here we have an artist in this dark way dealing with dark times, maybe making light of it, maybe critiquing it, making fun of our obsession with the things that we think are important right now. And so I don't have any answers here of what art's going to look like in this dark time, but thinking about what the role of the arts and how this kind of thing will impact the arts going forward, both now and going forward. So I'll stop sharing now.
That's great, Cary. You know, what's really interesting about that is you see one of the things that's kind of encouraging looking at Facebook and whatnot, is there are a lot of arts being done in isolation right now. There are people who are taking advantage of this time to, you know, I personally have been playing more guitar, I'm drawing more, but, you know, people doing live broadcast, even what we're doing. I never have used my, you know, my den as a broadcasting place. So it's interesting that times of crisis, and especially this one, can actually lead to creativity.
Can I add?
Yep.
Sorry.
Kumi, go.
Oh no, I think I wanted to actually respond to what Max was saying about creativity and thriving and the arts thriving. I agree, but I also feel like there's a lot of value in not doing anything.
Oh yeah.
Bored, right? Like I feel like there's so much conversation about how to keep ourselves occupied, how to keep our children occupied.
Or learn some new skill because exactly.
Or to create, like, but it's also very kind of capitalist work ethic, right? Like you have time now. Time is money. So you must produce.
I promise you, Kumi, I will make no money off of anything I produce.
But I think there's like, it's about resting your body and your mind enough to heal that maybe when things are done, you will create more. Like, I think the Brecht quote is so apt because it is about also like creating in retrospect, right? And being able to do that is doing the thinking, the resting, the planning, all of it now. But instead we're expected to produce. No.
Well, what I'm hopeful for, Kumi, is that some people are using the creativity as a form of relaxation and not the sense that, oh, I better learn all those skills that I didn't practice. You know, that the art and the creativity is part of a relaxing, community building, home building. So Rachel, is Dave playing music? Obviously he can't do it out now, but you know, the whole idea is how important that is for Dave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the kids and I have been doing lots of little videos, like, you know, we were planning to do it anyways because we're far away from all our loved ones, but little art, like artistic little goofy 1.5-minute long videos that we can share with our family. And it's our way of reaching out, right? Of like connecting back with Grandma and Uncle Joe and everybody back home.
Great. Well, we're going to bring in our mystery guest here, but I just wanted to show one thing to you folks, because Cary, your particular presentation reminded me of something. Back in January, I bought a bunch of a particular product to corner the market on Renaissance fairs, and now I've just had to give them away in the spirit of philanthropy. So I had bought about 25 of these beak masks here, and unfortunately, I've just had to give them all away. It just seems unethical to sell them. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that with you. Hey, are you curious about who our guest? Are you curious about who our mystery guest is?
I know, I'm curious. I've been waiting this whole time.
I bet everybody has. Why don't we bring in our mystery guest right now? Where is this mystery guest? We should find him. Oh, it's none other than, we're going to change your name too. It's none other than Lloyd Kramer, Professor of History, Chair of Faculty, and Director of Carolina Public Humanities. What a surprise. Lloyd, welcome.
Hello, everybody. It is a great pleasure to see you here, and I am honored to be here.
We're delighted to have you. Have you enjoyed the conversation so far?
I have enjoyed it. I'm drinking wine and trying to enjoy my condition here as a member of the Happy Hour.
As a member of the Happy Hour. So, Lloyd, as the mystery guest, you're going to be a little bit of a mystery guest because you're not really a mystery to us. Guess what? We know you pretty well, but what we do know about you is that you have a really unique way of making us see the light in the darkness. And you are an absolutely important person. Not only you give us a little bit of insight into what the faculty has had to deal with in your position as chair of the faculty, but also what you can tell us from history. So let's start with the first part. How has that been for being chair of the faculty?
Well, the faculty at UNC are doing amazing work, and they are struggling like everyone else to make sense of what's going on. Some people are using art or literature, some people are using science, some people are practicing medicine, but this is the challenge, how to find what you do best and cope with an unfamiliar situation.
I thought rosé was the challenge because you held it up in the end.
Can you see the rosé?
I can see the rosé.
Well, I am honored to be able to share this, and I want to point out that we have in intellectual history various traditions that give us a way to make sense of what we're doing. So could I share a little of that perspective?
Please do so.
I want you to know that I enjoy drinking with my friends. I enjoy talking with my friends. I don't always think about the past, but I have done a little work recently on trying to make sense of what is going on. And I want to share something here. If I may, let's see if I can pull this up. And can you see this?
We sure can.
So there are three great philosophical or humanistic elements that are helping me deal with this situation: Stoicism, historical knowledge, and French existentialism. Now, I know that does sound a little on the heavy side for a man drinking wine, but here I am. So first of all, I have gone back to Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher who lived between 55 and 135. He was an enslaved man. He was lame, and he argued that what scares us is the way we think about something rather than what's really happening. So here's what he said. What really frightens and dismays us is not external events themselves, but the way in which we think about them. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance. Skillful pilots gain their reputation from storms and tempests, make the best of what is in our power, and take the rest as it occurs. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, Lloyd, it makes total sense. And it reminds me a little bit of, I have a friend on Facebook who has been very good at predicting what is happening. And this person is saying by the end of May was some serious, some other prediction. And what my advice to him was that it feels different as it's happening. And that by the time May comes along, even if your prediction is correct, you will be a different person and it'll feel differently. It feels a little bit similar in that you have to take it in the place where you are. And
well, the key insight of the Stoics is there are things you can control and there are things you cannot control. And the key to happiness, to come back to our organizing question, is to recognize that the things you can't control should not create dismay, just change your way of thinking.
Yeah.
Well, that's Stoicism. The second framework for me is medieval history, and I love Boccaccio, who wrote the Decameron, which I think I misspelled on this, but see, we're all doing what we can.
Well, it's the Decameron in this case.
But the key is, you know, Cary just showed us an image of the art, and what Boccaccio lived through the plague in Florence in 1348, and we know that Italy is today the epicenter in Europe of the plague, one of the epicenters. And he said that this disease caused various fears and fantasies to take root in the minds of those who were still alive and well, and almost without exception, they took a single precaution, namely to avoid or run away from the sick. So what are we doing right now? We are isolating and running away from the sick. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. If you'll excuse my French, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And then let me just show you what he also said. He said, some people were of the opinion that a sober mode of living can reduce the risk of infection. They therefore lived in isolation from everyone else. They refrained from speaking to outsiders and entertained themselves with music and other amusements.
That's us.
Right? You're playing your music, right, Max?
That's right.
Others maintained that an infallible way of warding off this appalling evil was to drink heavily. And that's what I'm doing here.
That's also us.
Enjoy life to the full, go around singing and shrug the whole thing off as one enormous joke. And did you notice how many kids were still on the beach in Florida last week, drinking and shrugging the whole thing off as one enormous joke? And then finally, many other people steered a middle course. Instead of incarcerating themselves or drinking, these people moved about freely, holding in their hands a bouquet of flowers or fragrant herbs. Large numbers of men and women simply abandoned their homes, their relatives, their estates, and headed for the countryside. And I saw yesterday that people are going to the Hamptons in Long Island.
That's where Cary's from.
Yeah. So I want to say that everything we're seeing, if we look at it historically, people lived through this in 1348. So we're still struggling. And then finally, existentialism. I've always been fascinated by Albert Camus' great novel, The Plague, and I would love to organize a book group for Carolina Public Humanities. And he wrote about the great doctor, Dr. Rieux, who's trying to solve a plague in a North African city in 1947. The book is set right after World War II. And Dr. Rieux says, I have no idea what's awaiting me or what will happen when all this ends. For the moment, I know this, there are sick people and they need curing. I defend them as best I can, that's all. You do what you can and you are what you do. That's the existential response rather than the stoic response. And finally, this is a description of Dr. Rieux. This is from the great book, The Plague. There lay certitude, the narrator explains. There in the daily rounds of his medical work, all the rest hung on mere threads and trivial contingencies. You couldn't waste your time on it. The thing was to do your job as it should be done. And this is what the faculty at Carolina are trying to do their job as it should be done. And so I wanted to share this, and I'm coming back. Am I back?
You are back, indeed.
And I'm still drinking, although Boccaccio advises this doesn't solve the problem.
We assume that's the same glass of wine as when you started.
But I'm going to have a little more of it. So what I want to suggest simply is that the humanities, either through ancient philosophy or the history of the Middle Ages as described by Boccaccio, or the history of existential philosophy as described by Camus in his great novel, these are resources that make me happy, even though I miss my friends.
Oh.
So that is my take on what is happiness. It is trying to make sense of a complex situation with the resources we have as human beings that other people have helped to give us over the centuries.
And that's exactly what Humanities Happy Hour is trying to do, right? In this particular, taking the time to just think about these important issues from the past and our values and ideas. And so thank you, Lloyd. Of course, it's welcome. Hey, how would you folks out there in the Humanities Happy Hour virtual world like to engage with us and send us some chat questions, and we will all take on your questions. I don't see any right now, but let me just open up to our panelists if they would like to comment on any of their co-panelists' presentations or ideas.
Well,
Rachel?
can we jump in?
Yeah,
Cary,
you may.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Cary.
No, I didn't have anything. I was going to call on Rachel just to be awful.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lloyd.
Lloyd, please,
We know
what's
you got
up?
something.
Well, what I was going to say was that one of the most difficult things I'm finding is that I like to be with other human beings. And even though I like to read books, as I've just suggested, I miss the daily interaction with people in a room. And I think Kumi sort of talked about, we're very lucky, we're very fortunate to be in comfortable spaces, to have this amazing internet. And yet there is some human dimension that I'm missing. And when I saw today that Orange County is shutting down, locking down until April 30th, I thought, you know, this is going to be hard as the days go by.
Yeah.
I just can't get everything that I need in terms of interaction just by looking at pictures of people.
I would agree, and I think that it really has come to bear in our teaching in the sense that, you know, when this all started, everyone was joking that we're all going to become really familiar with Zoom, and we're going to become expert online teachers, and we're going to make ourselves obsolete. And I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's showing full well how much of a poor substitute this really is. All my friends are asking, how's it going? And I say, the best I could say is it's fine. You know, we're getting through it. We're getting through it together. We have amazing students that are helping us get through it, but it pales in comparison to the real thing. So this might be the death knell of online learning, even as it becomes the standard as we get through it.
Well, it's very interesting that personal contact is so absolutely essential to this whole interchange that we have. You know, I always feel like the most important parts of my class happen 5 minutes before class and 5 minutes, well, not the content, but 5 minutes after, because that's when these personal relationships happen, when the students come up to you, when they come to your office hours. You see them by their face. You don't see just this, you know, whatever profile picture that they've decided to put up and whatnot. So absolutely, it's changed the whole nature of teaching. I have 150 or 100 right now, 130 or so students in my class. I've given them asynchronous options for teaching, but I do find I do open up during normal class time if they would like to come and get consultations, and about 20 to 25 are showing up for those. And I understand, you know, but that's no substitute for personal interaction and being able to answer a question directly and whatnot. So it's a real challenge, especially in a big class where you're already faced with a little bit of distance in terms of being a lecturer. So yeah, it's very challenging. Kumi, how's your teaching coming? Or
So
you're on?
I have a class of am I still on? I'm not
You
muted.
are.
I am muted?
No, you're not. I can hear you.
So I have a class of 100 students and a seminar of 12. And I have decided not to do synchronous teaching because it was actually a request from, like, it's interesting because we have this kind of assumption also that all of our students have access to technology, that all of them, once they go home, have access to technology, or they have space to sit down for 50 minutes and learn. And I think those are the things that would go back to what Cary was saying, that what this reinforces is actually the significance of the classroom, because the university, the materiality of the university itself provides a space where learning can happen in a particular way. And that's really important, because a lot of my students, I'm finding out that what I get, so I do the same thing, I do chat with them during class hours after I have sent them videos and links and all kinds of things. And they come by just to say hi, because they also want the contact and the stability of that classroom or that interaction. So I think I'm with Cary that what this reinforces is that, you know, you can't really get rid of a university space. So I imagine that all of us are going to be experts. And here's the thing, we're not. There are people who've devoted their entire career to being really great online teachers. And a week and a half is not going to make me doom star, that's for sure.
Rachel, do you miss teaching?
I do, but I've been homeschooling a kindergartner and a second grader for 6 weeks now.
And so you don't miss having this challenge of the online teaching, I imagine would be.
One thing I was going to share is when we left Chapel Hill, we got some advice from Frank Porter-Graham, where our kids were in school in Chapel Hill, because we knew they'd be out of school for about a month as we transitioned to New Zealand. And that same advice came back to us from their New Zealand teachers. They made it into a New Zealand school for about a week before lockdown. So they've had 1 week of classroom school in the last 2 months. And the advice from both the American teachers and the Kiwi teachers was the same, which was focus on what you can do together as a family. Things that happen, the teaching that happens in schools, and I think this goes into universities too, is unique to being together in a group. And you can try to drill them on times tables or spelling or something, and like maybe it will sink in, but that's really not important. The important things that are coming out of school is like how to be considerate of another human being, and how to tune in when someone's having a bad day and find a way to make their day better. Social things, human things that school helps build, and families are now helping to build in the absence of school, are the things that the American teachers asked us to just focus on, that kind of thing, social and mental health, and not worry about the times tables and not stress about the vocabulary. And we took that to heart and have been doing that. And it feels like the right thing. Like, whatever, every kid in the world is going to be in the same boat. They're all out of school. Like, they'll all catch up together right now. Like, don't worry about that stuff and just focus on being like together.
That's great. I want to make sure we can get a few public questions in here. Folks, I want to thank you all for bearing with us as we learn this technology and whatnot. But at the bottom of your screen, folks, you'll see a chat function. You can give us questions. And I have a couple here that I'll start with. One is our good friend, Jonathan Gerard. Jonathan, hello. And Jonathan asks, and I open this to the panel, is it happiness we should seek at a time of crisis, or is it meaning? I like Camus, as does Lloyd. Does he experience an obligation to respond to the need of another, even at the expense of happiness? Is it happiness we should seek at a time of crisis, or meaning? Jonathan, you just throw it right at us here, and every one of us is just jumping to answer this question.
Could I jump in on that?
I knew you would be the one.
I think this is a really good point, that in a time of crisis, meaning is what we're looking for, but it may not bring immediate happiness, but it gives us a sense of purpose. And I think that one of the things that I've noticed about Carolina Public Humanities, if we think of a community where people share a purpose, that doesn't necessarily make you happy in the short run, but it sustains you and gives you a sense of meaning. And I think that's what might be a better way of understanding our situation now. In other words, not fall into existential despair.
And I don't think, I'll just chime in, that trying to be happy doesn't sound like a good strategy, right? Like, feel what you're feeling, and know from Kumi's poem and from Cary's art and Lloyd's discussion that humans have felt these things over generations and millennia when faced with similar situations. And it's okay to not be happy. This is a scary, freaky, crazy time that we're living through, and don't put pressure on yourself like you need to be happy in a situation like this. Like, it's okay. You will find little pockets of happiness here and there, but just ride what it is that you're feeling, because that's okay.
And happiness is such a loosey-goosey term, right? Like, right. I don't know. I folded laundry today. That, like, was amazing because I never have time to fold laundry, and that
You can come to my house and fold it. It'll make me happy.
it made me really happy. And I'm like, well, that's the thing, right? Like when we think about happiness, I think also it's such an American approach to life too, that these, like, we want big moments like that. We want big solutions, big moments, and big possibilities. And maybe happiness is the small stuff, like, you know, folding a lot of towels.
Folding towels. Well, it sounds like that
Like
might
a
be
Hollywood happiness, right? Like a movie script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it actually is a good lead up to our next question. Our dear friend Diane Tyndall, hello Diane, has a wonderful statement and question. Diane writes, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. I think it's important to seek beauty, goodness, and hope in difficult, uncertain times. What are some examples of art that exhibit a sense of hope during dark periods of history, and what can we learn from them?"
Well, you know, it's a tricky thing, I think, because, you know, we ask a lot of art. We ask it to give us hope, to give us happiness, to entertain us, but also to provide critique and commentary and consciousness and awareness of the world around us. And sometimes those things are in conflict, and it probably is a matter of what your disposition, maybe linked to what we were just talking about, of finding happiness. For some people, escape into art, into the arts, is necessary or desirable because it allows you to escape the situation. For others, the arts are an arena actually to look at hard truths. And sometimes the things that always gave us pleasure and happiness may no longer do those things quite as well when we're in different times, when our perspectives have changed. And maybe it's important to think about, you know, yes, it's a random set of occurrences that caused this situation that's beyond anyone's control, but there is a lot that could have been different if our world was different. And so I think it's a tricky thing. You know, we don't want to just say, you know, it's all about just enjoying the moment and being there and not thinking about these things, because a lot of these things didn't have to be quite as bad as they are, and could have been different, and going forward could still be different. And so it's important to, I don't know if I'm answering the question at all.
Could I jump in?
Actually, I don't even remember what the question was, but
It was about beautiful art in trying times.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, it's my way of saying, you know, for me, I don't really, I mean, I'm sitting in front of a beautiful picture here by Ellsworth Kelly, but I don't, you know, to me, I don't know. I've been watching Seinfeld.
No, let me give an example. I've been watching on Netflix this series called The Medici. Has anybody seen this? And it's a kind of disturbing set of events, but it shows Cosimo de' Medici supporting Donatello producing sculpture, and Brunelleschi creating the dome of the cathedral, even as people are dying of the plague in Florence in the 1400s. And it's sort of an affirmation that life goes on, and I think art can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And be bigger than the individual.
It certainly
That's
feels
right. It's not just about the individual.
There's certainly something to be said for the spiritual as a source of beauty, and I think a lot of people are, for those that are religious, are probably thinking about this in religious terms. And in the case of the Medici, you know, a lot of this art, of course, is religious art. Or art that is in some way propping up the community, if the community is the leader or something to that effect. But in ways of finding things to be hopeful about. If it's the afterlife, I suppose that's one approach to it. But certainly religious values gives a sense of succor and a sense of relief in these anxious times.
It just it becomes like,
go ahead, Cary.
I was just going to say, it just, you know, it is, I find it challenging because you do realize in these times, especially something like this, like a pandemic, how interconnected we all are on this world, and how much, you know, the things that give you pleasure might come at others' expenses. And, you know, you think about those bozos out on the beach, you know, the guy that we've all seen the video of, some poor kid that's going to live in infamy for saying, you know, if I get corona, I get corona, right? I mean, it's not going to stop me from partying.
Or it's not going to stop the economy from getting going by Easter.
Exactly. You know, if everyone, what we all realize here is that, like, a lot of us are not in the threatened group of people, and yet we're sacrificing our own pleasure in order to protect the community as a whole. And that's a really important moment that I think people should reflect upon. That can apply to other things. It doesn't just have to apply to pandemics, where, you know, we can do a little bit more of sacrificing our own pleasure for the good of the community.
Well, I will, that's a wonderful point to end on, Cary. I will say that you're so good at wrapping things up. I will say that we will do our part here at Carolina Public Humanities to provide opportunities for these exchanges. The Humanities Happy Hour will be every Thursday from 6 to 7. Next week, we're going to be talking about drama and theater with the wonderful Al Duncan, with the wonderful Mary Floyd Wilson. We hopefully will have other guests involved about how theater has dealt with this during times. We'll be talking about books 2 weeks from today, about what books to be reading and how books help us get through this, and all sorts of other topics. So we'll be doing our part. We have also ideas for book groups online, which we'll be putting together, as well as looking at special webinars that'll be a little bit more focused with a lot more slides to share screens and whatnot. So we're doing our part. And I just want to thank all of you out in the world who have tuned in to this Humanities Happy Hour. Share it with folks. We'll have a recording of it. We hopefully will be able to have twice as many people next week. And then the next thing you know, we'll just become a phenomena. We don't know.
Max, could I just say one thing?
You're the director, Lloyd. You can do whatever you want.
This experience, to me, also shows the limits of an online exchange, because normally at a CPH event, all of the people in this community would be asking questions, posing their own ideas. I would be asking, so what is your way of dealing with this? Is it art? Is it literature? Is it Stoic philosophy or existentialism or religion? And we would have a conversation, and this is what we want to find a way to do to keep our community going. Our phrase is communities, conversations, and creativity. And we have to find a way to keep the conversation going.
The only thing that's easier is
here, but I can't hear them.
Yeah, the only thing that's easier about this than running it, first of all, we miss seeing our friends. So many friends that I'm seeing in this list of participants. I miss your faces. The only benefit to this is that it's easier to control the microphone.
But right. And everybody can drink in their own leisure.
Yes, exactly. So what I wanted to end with, folks, because we are in a happy hour, and even if you're not enjoying a beverage right now, I want all of us to raise our glasses or just your minds and toast all of those who are doing great work in our medical facilities, our first line responders in our grocery stores who are staying there, and every essential service that is still open. Here's a toast to all of them. Thank you for doing the work you're doing. And I want to thank all of you for coming to tonight's Humanities Happy Hour. It's really been a delight, and we'll see you next week. Wait, let me thank our guest, Rachel. So good to see you from New Zealand.
Hi, guys.
Kumi, thank you, and give my best to Dave, and tell everybody to stay calm, and we'll see you on the other side of this. Cary Levine, you're only a mile away. Maybe at some point we can have a bonfire between us or something. We'll have to work on that. Lloyd Kramer, we'll see you on the virtual sphere soon enough. All of our friends and guests at Carolina Public Humanities, we love you and we miss you, and we're thinking about you, and we'll be here doing more of this in the future. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Keep calm and carry on.
That's right.
Bye-bye.